Alopecia is a subject that affects many people, and a lot of people feel really helpless in their fixes. In this video, I'm going to show you how to take a bald area and cover it so that you don't have to worry about it anymore. For this method, you'll need the following items. We'll be using linkies, your linkies closer, a micro needle or a linkies pulling tool, weaving thread. The weaving needle, I'm using a curved, but they do come in a few different styles. Some shears, combs and brushes to keep the hair out of the way, and weaving hair. This is hair that's on a weft, and it's stitched at the top and comes down. We'll also be using a type of lace. This is called a Swiss lace. It's really a fine grade of tooling, and we'll need just enough of it to cover our spot. So this is how we're gonna get started. So slide your linkies onto your pulling tool. The idea with this is we're gonna create a ring around our spot. Now, if you have hair that's short and long, kind of intermittent throughout the patch that you're trying to cover, just don't use it to create your ring. Just push it off to the side or clip it out of the way for now. Then we're going to pick up a section of hair that is like a small rectangle, and we're going to split it into two. We're going to pull the hair into the ring, like so. Then we're going to go back down through the ring and pick up the other section of hair and pull that through the ring. So you've created a little X. Don't worry, we'll do that a few times if you didn't quite catch it. We're going to pull the sides of the X so that they're taut, not tight, just taut. And we're going to adjust that ring into place and clamp down. Next, we're going to move to the space adjacent to it. Same thing, we're going to pick up a slight rectangle and you split that into two. Now, if you have any tiny hairs that are creating little corners, you can go ahead and separate that away because you don't want anything that's going to create a real definitive point or anything that's going to travel too far, because those will end up pulling and causing discomfort. So we're going to take that, slide it into your ring. Okay, now that you've got one on, you're going to go down, pick up the other hair and pull it through. That creates your X. From here, you're going to grab your tool. Make sure that you have enough wiggle room to move around because you don't want this to be too tight, especially on that fine hair. And you crimp it into place. Continue working around your area until you've created an entire ring. We're using a 2mm linky for this process because it's the smallest size and therefore requires the smallest amount of hair to pass through to get a secure hold. We're also using a blonde color. When you're doing this, you're going to want to match your root color for the least detectable installation. We've completed our first pass, and now we're going to connect each section together to create added stability. We're going to pick up the leg from one side and the one next to it, and we're going to use those as our two pieces to create an X similar to what we did in the first section. So going back down through our ring and picking up the second strand. Now we have the ring in place. Using our pliers to make sure that it's in the right location and squeezing to seal that ring. Okay, next section, you're just going to repeat the same motions. Pick up the one leg, pull the ring onto the hair. Make sure that you move any crosshairs out of the way. Go down through your ring. Pick up the second leg, flip that lever, and pull it through. I'm going to position the ring where I want it and crimp it into place. Continue connecting each piece until you've made it all the way around your circle. Your piece of lace will ultimately want to be bigger than your section that you're trying to cover. So ours has about this much on the sides in each direction. So we're going to move that out of the way. And the next I want to talk to you about the hair. The hair itself is going to be going in a multitude of directions. If you have hair that's coming up, we're going to position that all the way over and down. Don't ever try to bend it straight down like that because it'll want to pop up and create cowlicks. So you want to try to maintain that natural flow and that natural bend. So just comb your hair so that it falls as you want it to. Now we're going to put in a couple of stitches just to hold our lace in place. Going directly underneath the rings will ensure that you're pulling the least amount of crosshairs. You can go between the rings around the hair, but it's best to put most of your anchoring stitches where the rings are. Be careful as you sew this lace, it is fragile. So you can create holes accidentally very easily. And I'm just repositioning all the hair as I go to make sure it's exactly where I want it. Sometimes it's easy to go through the lace and then kind of scoop some of that hair that needs to be held a little tighter. That's usually right when you're talking about the top corners, because that's where the hair rounds around and down. So you can see it kind of bundles up a little bit right here. And we do that so that it won't stick straight out. It'll be easier to work with this way. Okay, and as you go, you may need to reposition your lace. That's okay. You want to make sure that it's in the right spot as you work. There is a tendency when you're on this top side to start lifting and pulling this lace up. So just be careful as you round these corners to keep it pulled down and in place. Okay, we're on a corner here, and this is where those bundles are going to be a little bit heavier. So we're just going to keep that in mind and make sure that we're scooping all of that hair into our stitching. Because if we didn't gather it, it might stick out front and look funny. Okay. We've met up with our other thread at the other side, and so it's our time now to check and make sure that everything is going in the right direction and we like the way that it feels. So right now I've got a piece of hair that I don't really care for the way that's poking out, so I'm going to continue stitching around, and I'm actually going to force that down a little bit. So I'm going to sew up just past it, pull it down, and put that stitch in. And that's gonna basically, my thread is now forcing that hair back down so we don't have a cowlick in that spot. And I'm just gonna put another stitch in just to make sure that it's holding really well. Okay, so now I like the position that all of the hair is going in, so I'm just going to knot and tie off my thread. So I'm going to go underneath the thread, around twice, pull. I'm going to separate the two threads that are coming to my needle. I'm going to pull that tight. Then I'm going to snip my thread. And then I'm going to do something unique. I'm going to use my Linky's micro needle, and I'm going to go underneath the row and out through my netting, and I'm going to grab the thread and pull it back under. And what that did is I now have one thread that's not going around and one thread that's going under, and I'm gonna tie these two together. 2 loops around with the thread and down, and then 2 regular knots, like that. And that will ensure that this is not coming out. So I'm just gonna snip that away. Also, while we're in this position, we are ready to take off this extra lace. If you have anything that didn't get stitched up tight, you will want to go ahead and cut that away at this time. You want to leave a couple millimeters of an edge, that way you don't cut into where you've stitched, but anything else is just excess. And you may or may not have extra to cut off all the way around. Doesn't look like we have a whole lot on this bottom edge. Nope, none at all. So it's just a little bit on the top. The next step is where the magic happens. That's when we get to put our wefts in place. Now we're ready to apply our wefts. We're going to hold our extension hair up to our lowest point, measure side to side, and cut. We'll be adding several additional layers, working upwards, and we'll measure those as we go. So with your needle threaded, you're going to put it into your extension hair, and you're going to do 1 anchor stitch first. Then you are going to hold it up to the lowest point, go around the edge that you've created with your rings, and stitch that on. Since this is our lowest point, this will go straight across, but we'll want that to go into the lace around the lowest part of that ring. This is where it gets really important that you're using thread that's the same color. If you can't find thread that is the same color, be sure to use ones that are slightly darker. Okay, and now we're at the edge. Make sure that your edges get sewn down very well, because you don't want to have them lifting. So I usually sew all the way out to the edge of my weft, which is right here, and then I do a couple stitches back toward the center. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the same knot that I did when we finished our base ring thread. Okay, so the first in our knot is to go underneath the thread, come out, around twice, and pull down tight. Take the 2 threads, separate them and pull. Then I'm going to cut the thread. I'm going to use my Linky's micro needle. Pick up one leg of the thread, go underneath our weft, go up through, grab that thread, and pull it down and around. This is going to actually tie that thread right to that weft. Okay, just like that. Now we're ready to do our next piece of weaving hair. When you position the next piece, make sure that you are respecting the thickness of the weft and the thickness of your client's hair. You're trying to replace an unnaturally thin spot, but you don't want to make it an unnaturally thick spot in the process. So just like before, we're going to go through our weft and back through our thread to anchor our stitch before we start. Position it in place, and we're going to go around our base ring to anchor that down. If you get hairs while you stitch, just pull those out of the way. Make sure that you anchor it all the way to the corner, because you don't want to feel any flaps lifting up. Okay, this part is a little bit different than the first step, because in this step, we're going to actually be sewing directly to this lace. So you need to be very careful because again, it is delicate. So under the weft, make sure you pick up that lace, but don't pull. You can pull your thread, just be careful that you're not pulling too tight to create holes. And this will anchor that weft directly to that piece of Swiss lace that we've attached. If you're heavy-handed and you know you're going to be heavy-handed, it might actually be best to apply 2 layers of Swiss lace, but I find you really only need 1 if you're delicate. Okay, now we're at the edge, so I'm going to go around my base ring and back up through. And that will secure my corner. Okay, I'm going to do a couple small stitches on the sides. And then I'm going to work my way a little bit closer to the center. And the reason why I'm working my way back towards the center is I don't want to put a knot right on a corner. People will be more likely to feel it if it's on the corner, and I want this to be as flawless as possible. Okay, so same knot as before, I went under my thread, going to go around twice. Pull that down, separate the thread, tighten it down a little bit further. Be careful again, don't pull out, pull straight across so it just tightens the thread. Cut that off. Grab your micro needle underneath the weft, up through the top, grab that thread, and now you're going to tie that thread right around that weft. So once, twice, down, and now 2 singles, 1 and 2. And at this point, you can start to see that our spot is filling in nicely. Okay. So from here, we're going to determine, do we need 1 more or do we need 2 more? And I think that when I put this up, it's still a little bit thin underneath, so I'm going to put it down here and do 1 and then 2. For the last row, I wanted to show you how undetectable this can look. So I'm using a dark brown color thread, which is just slightly darker than our client's color. Be sure to tack down your corners extremely well, as this will be the main focal point when people run their fingers through their hair. You don't want them catching any of that extension weft. Continue sewing the length of the weft and then tack it down at the other corner. As you can see, as we work across, the only thing visible down below is that lighter color thread, and that's exactly why we want to use the natural hair color. I've cut my weft a little bit wider because I like to make sure that I can follow the curve a little bit. So I've left it a little bit long, and I'm going to cut off the excess right after I round that corner. Keeping your top layer just slightly longer will ensure that you have the most coverage of the layer directly below. We've tacked down our corner, and now I'm stitching closer into the center. So that I don't place my knot directly on that edge. Going underneath the thread, out, around twice, pull, separate the thread and pull out. Cut your thread and use your micro needle to finish the knot. Now we've got our piece in place, it's ready to cut it so that the hair blends in with our style. So for that, I'm going to take our extension piece and find the hair underneath. And for this cut is fairly blunt, but it also has some points to it. So I'm just going to point cut this into our style. Checking to see where the natural hair is. Okay, and our length is pretty close. So the next step would be to match the texture and thickness. So we're going to use a razor to do that. We're not going to use thinning shears because this is a wefted hair. If you were to take thinning shears to a wefted hair, you would hold it up at elevation like you would normally do. When you make your cut, you're gonna see where your lines were placed. Remember, wefted hair moves as a bundle. So we're going to use our razor and just slide cut any of that bulk out. Now, if you don't have a razor, you can always use your shears and do some slice cutting, but I like to use a razor because I think it's easier and it goes a little bit faster. So we're just going to notch into these. Don't go too deeply or you're gonna carve out too much. We're not trying to do layers here. We're just trying to match the texture and thickness to the natural hair. Periodically, run your fingers through, check your texture, and see how you like it. If you feel any thick spots, that's when you know it's time to go back in. Since we did put in straight extension hair and the hair has a natural bend to it, we'll want to match that. So I'm using a little Wonder brush. I'm just going to pick up the entire piece and probably a little bit of the natural hair too. And I'm going to pull that down. And I'm just going to run my flat iron through it. Just to create a nice subtle bend at the ends. This completes our finished look. These pieces can be left for about a month to a month and a half before they need to be redone, and that really depends on how fast your hair grows. When they're ready to be taken out, you're going to simply cut the threads and remove the pieces, leaving the ring of rings. To remove the linky rings, we're simply going to expose the rings, clip the hair out of the way, And using your Dr. Locks universal opener, simply grab the ring, hold it so that it's parallel, and squeeze. From there, the ring will open up and simply slide right out of the hair. Once you've removed the rings, you're ready for your next installation. Thanks for watching, and if you liked this video, make sure that you subscribe to our channel so that you never miss a beat. And if you need products for your projects, check out doctoredlocks.com for all your hair extension needs.